your best side?
I don't know. So I'm working with Chris and Elka as their coach. We've met a few times now. Chris can't be here today because he's running his badminton club, so I'm going to sort of talk about the work that I've done with Chris and what he's sort of sent me and told me he's doing so far, and then what we plan to do in the future. His focus was to encourage more meaningful responses to written feedback, so staff written feedback, green pen. He was finding that a lot of his responses when he looked through his books, and we looked through his books, were very short responses. Yes sir, okay, I'll do it next time. And he really feels quite strongly that he wants it to be of value to the children and not so much a tick box exercise that we're doing just so we're showing we've got red pen in the books. So we've talked about this, we've come up with some strategies that he can use and that we can maybe try and measure and monitor over time. So one of the ones he came up with was to build some comment banks for pupils to use. So instead of just writing very short answers, they use some good English to respond before they actually go in and make their corrections. Because I know maths that we could probably communicate just numerically all the way through a book and not really need to write in good English. But he's thinking about building comment banks like, thank you sir, I will make sure that I complete all my working out and show my method fully in future, and then go ahead and do it in red pen underneath, so if anyone's looking at the books, or when the child goes back to the book, they can look at what they've done. And this is the important bit, I think, posing questions. I mean, in maths especially, I think when children make mistakes, they need questions as well as just giving them the answer. A lot of times there's no point in just writing out the correct answer for them. They're not gonna get it. You need to give them a sequence of questions that builds them up to the point at which they can answer that question or solve that problem. So we talked about maybe when he marks a set of books, if there's one misconception that's common in a group of students, maybe have one set question that he's going to ask for that group of students. So cutting down his time a little bit. So he'll have a set question that he's going to ask for those 5 children because they all got that problem wrong. But then for other students, given the books he marks, have specific questions. So for your higher ability students, maybe 1 or 2 questions that extend what they've done. For lower ability students, maybe scaffold some questions that take them from a very simple example to a quite more challenging example. So he's looked at simplifying and expanding. So you might give a question about simplifying an expression, then expanding one, and then expanding and simplifying. So they're linking skills together as they go through. But as we said, that's going to depend on the child's book and the work that they produce. Okay. So they were some sort of specific things he could do in his marking and then getting them to respond to it. He wants to make sure that marking's more frequent for him as well, because there's this thing where we mark a set of books every 2 weeks maybe, or a week, and then the child might not go back to that bit of red pen ever again in some instances. So what do? Maybe every time we give them some time, we let them go back and look at all their feedback that they've received, and maybe just use terms with them like, so how have you progressed over the course of this book? Can you see that you've made progress? Have you not made progress? Where have you made progress? Why haven't you made progress? And just start a dialogue with them about the red pen instead of it just being a task we do them. So not just do the red pen, sit quietly, get round the room, talk to them, and start to use red pen in lessons more. So getting the children to mark their own work in red pen and then do corrections on the spot in red pen. So if you go over and you see someone's not done it, I mean, something I do is always have a green pen in my top pocket, and if I'm talking to a child and they've done something wrong in the book, you can get it down. I know quite a few of us do that. But it's about trying to keep marking live, I think, not this thing we take home, we give to the children, we don't talk to them about it, and that's it. So for us moving on, I made the suggestion that maybe we take a group of his, survey them at this point in time, look at their book, survey them, what do they think about the written feedback they're getting, the way they respond to it, apply some of these strategies over 5 or 6 weeks, and then survey them again at the end, so we've actually got something measurable that we can look at and then say, well, this has had an impact or this has not had an impact. But as I said to Chris, really the proof is in the assessment data at the end of the year as to whether or not they understand concepts, and that comes from everything that's going on in the classroom, not just the red pen, but I think it has a big impact. So that's what I've been working on with Chris. Elka and I have been working on differentiation. Yes. She's very nervous.
No, I'm not.
So
I'm fine. I would like to focus on differentiation, especially in science. Why I think, and I really, I have to admit, I still have sometimes problems to differentiate properly, especially in bottom set or in a set where the ability of students is lower. So what we were talking with Martin was to looking at to go for schools data, and then to plan the lesson, or to plan differentiation just by looking for this go for school data, and which I'm doing already a little bit. And then what the science has now developed, which I find really, which is helpful for me, is the description sheet, which I have here, which describes the flight pathway. Yeah, and the one, like for example, if the student, especially in the bottom set, is at developing secure, which mine is the most, so they are on secure in developing, only 2 or 3 are having that set, they are on exceeding. I'm looking, and it tells you already either to describe, to outline, to identify, and then you go higher to assess and to evaluate. So already finding certain differentiated questions while I am preparing my lesson and my learning objectives. I mean, the learning objective I do, and I will try. I'm putting one learning objective for each student, where they are up to now, the starting point. So either they are on secure, they write only the learning objective in the book, that is the securing part. But I would still like to try for some of the students, and that I did today in one of the lessons. I said, okay, for all of you is that securing part, but I also want you to try to do that assessment and put a few information from the exceeding part into it. And when I'm marking, I have already that differentiation in it. And the questions, what I would like to do now while I'm planning my lesson, to look already, to write down some questions. They are differentiated questions for my lower ability students and questions for my 2 or 3 students in there, which I can really stretch to the highest. So that's what I tried to do now with Martin for the next lessons. So go already in a class with these differentiated questions for each lesson plan, which I hope it will help me. Because I don't want that this happens and Martin saw my lesson last time and said, I'm doing a little bit for that bottom set, I stretched too much. So it was already too much for some of them, and then they get not bored, but they get frustrated because they cannot answer the questions according to their ability. And that's what I try now to really differentiate within the classroom and within the kids. So that's my focus on for the next weeks and months to come with Martin. Also to build their independence, so that the students with the lower ability get stretched and feel comfortable and very proud that have actually achieved something very good in the class, so they don't lose the interest on the subject and the interest on some of the science topics which are very difficult to understand. And then I have students in there. He's very bright. I think he should not be in that set. Always there has every question, but he doesn't know how to put it down on paper. So, and I try with him to stretch him further, so he feels not that he's asked actually something that is below his ability, that he can do more than what he's already done. So that's what I'm doing now. It's what I would like to focus on. with Martin.
And one of the other things we
For-
said we probably do now as well, because I haven't seen you in your work specialism.
Oh yes,
So
For-
I want to go and see
That's
you
right.
teaching outside of science
Right.
and see if there's stuff that you're doing that you don't realise you're doing that you could then
Yes.
apply to your science.
because for
lessons.
me in BTEC lessons, we have the part, we have the merit, we have the distinction.
Okay, cheers.
And I try automatically when I do plan for BTEC lessons for year 10s, year 11s, and year 12, 13, I try already to do the higher differentiation while I'm planning it, and I do not have that in science sometimes. And I really still have problems to differentiate properly, especially to stretch the kids with lower ability more, and that's what I would like to do. I wait until they answer. I give questions a lot, but that's what I do with Martin. I would love to just show him the questions if they are really differentiated enough, and then he will come to my lesson and look at it again in my bottom set.
We're in quite a nice position because we're teaching the same year group, the
Yes.
same stuff. So
But this is a real help, I would say.
yeah, these are level descriptors
Yes.
basically that we've adapted or
For
Cat's
all-
adapted.
Yeah, Cathars are great. That helped me totally yesterday as well.
Yeah.
So even while I was marking, and it is on all the topics we go through. So what I expect for them to do on the flight path of foundation development, secure and exceeding end-to-end. Really good.
I think preparing your questions is really important.
Yes.
You know, and particularly higher order questions, and having, you know, especially if you want to evidence progress and differentiate your questions, you really have to think about them and think about the language you're
Yeah.
using, who you're directing to,
Yes.
what you expect back, you know, full sentences,
Yes.
using technical language.
And that's what I have done in the lesson we observed. Some of the questions were too high
Yeah.
too high on the level for the weaker ones. So they were just, of course they couldn't answer. Yeah. And then of course I get nervous, because I'm thinking everybody's quiet. It's a beautiful class. Really, I mean,
Yeah, they're lovely.
bottom set, but just so interested in focusing and no problems discipline-wise, nothing whatsoever.
What year is this?
Year 8.
Right.
I really, really love this class to go in and so interested what they're doing. But then when they're just looking at me and saying, oh my God, what have I done now? And you can see, they don't have no idea
They
what
want
I was
to
talking
please.
about.
They really want to please. And
They
want to give you
just,
the
yes,
right answer.
really, I have to say. Yeah.
Thank you so much, but we have another meeting.
You
That's
go.
really valuable, thank you. The other thing on your live marking, just before we finish, is rather than you doing all the green pen work and doing all the work, another good one is just use a highlighter and
Oh, yeah.
just highlight any mistakes or anything you want them to reflect on and say, I'll be back in a few minutes and we'll come back. Have you sorted out why I've highlighted that, or why I might want you to develop it, or why it might not be quite right? It's just putting the onus back on them, the independence, they go and find out, and then I'll come back. And it's good evidence in books then of live marking, because sometimes when we green pen, it's not always so evident that we've done it in class and we've been doing that really good practice. We may have been doing it when we've taken the books in. It's not always ultra evident.
I think you made a really good point. I know you talked about Chris's work. Going back and
Yeah.
revisiting.
Yeah,
You might have a
exactly.
thick
I think
exercise
so,
book.
yeah.
You might be at the end. And it's going back and actually
Nice
to
if
refresh
they
and
came in and
recap
said,
it
oh,
going
I've
through.
made this much progress, I know that,
I
because
know.
look at from we routinely go back through my book and I can do these types of equations at the start. And Sir's done this for me, and I respond to it, now I can do it, and they just like,
Yeah,
fantastic. Yeah. Where else they're going with that? Nowhere.
yeah. That's great then. Thanks very much for sharing, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So